The words still echoed in my ears, a cold, clinical pronouncement that had shattered my world. Get your things and get out of this house immediately. Don't tell your children anything. I stared at my reflection in the dark screen of my phone. My favorite mug, the one with the chipped blue rim I'd had since my teaching days. 20 years ago, sitting forgotten on the counter. Its tea gone cold. That morning had begun with the same comforting rhythm that had defined my life for the past 30 years in this house. The sun had streamed through the bay window in the kitchen, illuminating the dust motes dancing above the oak table my husband Arthur had built with his own hands. The air smelled of lemon-scented polish and the lavender that grew in a tangled, happy mess by the back door. This home was my anchor, my living scrapbook. Every scuff on the hardwood floor told a story. Every faded patch on the floral wallpaper held a memory. The living room, where we'd opened Christmas presents. The dining room, where we'd celebrated graduations. The garden where Arthur had proposed. It was all here. A perfect, peaceful diorama of a life well-lived. My daughter, Evelyn, my vibrant, headstrong Evie, had moved back home 8 months ago after losing her job at the architectural firm. At 35, she'd returned with 3 suitcases and a shattered confidence that clung to her like a shadow. She spent her days in her old bedroom, the one with the faint outline of a unicorn sticker still on the door, scrolling through job listings on her laptop with a defeated slump in her shoulders. My son Gregory had never left. He worked as a freelance IT consultant. His domain, the converted basement, where the hum of computer servers was a constant, low-level buzz. He was quiet, methodical, the polar opposite of his sister. Lately, he'd seemed more withdrawn than usual. His answers at dinner clipped, his eyes avoiding mine when I asked about his work. I'd chalked it up to the stress of his freelance projects and the tension of having his sister back under the same roof. My days had settled into a predictable, if lonely, pattern. Wake at 6, water the hydrangeas Arthur had planted for our 20th anniversary. Putter in the kitchen, making meals that were often eaten alone. Watch the evening news, and go to bed by 10. The house, once bursting with noise and chaos, was now a museum of quiet memories. But that morning, the rhythm had been broken. A persistent, musty smell had been creeping from the heating vents in my bedroom for over a week. It was a strange, chemical odor, subtle but unmistakable, like something burning that shouldn't be. It was strongest in the mornings, when the heat first kicked on. I'd mentioned it to Gregory a few days prior. It's probably just dust burning off the heating elements. Mom, he'd said without looking up from his phone, this old system always acts up when the seasons change. Don't worry about it. But I did worry. The smell was giving me a dull, persistent headache that lingered throughout the day. I felt more tired than usual, a bone-deep fatigue that my morning tea couldn't shake. Last night, I'd woken up gasping, my heart hammering, a metallic taste in my mouth. It was the 3rd time this week, so I'd called a specialist. Gregory had been oddly resistant. It's a waste of money, Mom. I can look at it this weekend. It's my health. Gregory, I need to know if it's something in the air. I'd found the number for Apex Air Quality and HVAC services in the local paper. A man named Robert had answered, his voice calm and competent. He'd been able to come out that very afternoon. An hour later, the doorbell had chimed. I'd opened the door to a man in his late 40s, tall and solidly built, with kind eyes and a neat beard shot through with gray. He wore a clean, navy blue uniform with the company's logo, stylized mountain peaks stitched over his heart. Mrs. Gable, I'm Robert. You called about a concerning odor. Please, come in, Robert. It's this way. I led him to my bedroom at the top of the stairs. He'd gone in with his equipment, a sleek metal case and various probes. After a few minutes, he came out, his brow furrowed. Ma'am, the readings in there are unusual. To do a proper assessment, I'll need to access your furnace and the main duct. Is there access from the basement? Yes, through the door in the kitchen. Do you need me to show you? No, that's quite all right. I can manage. This might take a little while. I'd nodded, a knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. There was a new tension in his voice, a professional concern that hadn't been there before. He'd disappeared through the basement door, and the house had fallen silent except for the occasional thump or scrape from below. I'd busied myself deadheading the lavender bushes outside. The sweet scent a welcome relief from the strange smell in my room. I looked up at Evelyn's window. The curtains were drawn. She'd been sleeping later and later, her days and nights blurring into one another. I was worried about her. A mother knows. She'd lost weight, and there was a pallor to her skin that a few weeks of sunshine hadn't been able to fix. When I'd gently suggested she see a doctor, she'd brushed me off. "I'm just tired, Mom. Job hunting is its own special kind of hell. I'll be fine." But I wasn't so sure. The footsteps coming up from the basement pulled me from my thoughts. Robert emerged, but the calm professional was gone. His face was pale, his jaw tight. He closed the basement door firmly behind him. "Did you find the source of the smell?" I asked, wiping my soil-covered hands on my jeans. He looked at me, his gaze intense, as if trying to gauge my strength. "Mrs. Gable, we need to talk. Can we sit down?" His tone sent a chill straight through me. "Of course. Is it serious?" "It's not what I expected." He led the way to the kitchen table, the same one where my children had done their homework. He sat across from me, placing his hands flat on the wooden surface. They were clean, capable hands, but I could see a slight tremor in his right one. "Ma'am, do you live here alone?" "No. My son, Gregory, lives here full-time. My daughter, Evelyn, moved back in recently. They both have access to the basement." "Why?" He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Mrs. Gable, what I found down there isn't a malfunctioning furnace. Someone has modified your HVAC system, specifically the duct that feeds directly into your bedroom." The world seemed to tilt. "Modified? How?" "It's complicated, but the short version is that someone installed a secondary delivery system, a series of canisters and a timed dispersal unit integrated directly into the main air supply for your room." The words felt like a foreign language. "A delivery system? For what?" "That's the question." His eyes were full of a grim pity. "Based on the residue and the setup, I'd say it's designed to aerosolize a chemical compound." "Have you been experiencing any unusual health symptoms lately? Headaches, fatigue, respiratory issues?" My blood ran cold. "Yes, all of those. I thought it was just my age." "And your children, have they had similar symptoms?" I thought of Gregory, hale and hearty, of Evelyn, whose malaise seemed purely emotional. No, they seem perfectly fine." Robert nodded slowly, as if I'd just confirmed his darkest suspicion. "Mrs. Gable, I need you to listen to me very carefully. This is going to be difficult to hear, but you must believe me. That device is not an accident. It was put there intentionally, by someone who has regular, unimpeded access to your home. The concentration levels are programmed to increase incrementally. Prolonged exposure." He trailed off, his meaning hanging heavy in the air between us. "Prolonged exposure would what?" My voice was a thin, reedy thing. "Without intervention, the effects would become severe. Organ failure. It would look like a rapid, aggressive form of natural causes." The kitchen, my warm, sunny kitchen, suddenly felt like a tomb. "You're saying someone in this house is trying to poison me?" "I'm saying the evidence points overwhelmingly in that direction. The technical knowledge required, the access, it's not the work of a stranger." "No." The denial was a reflex, a primal scream from a mother's heart. "That's impossible. My children, they couldn't." "Mrs. Gable," he said, his voice firm yet gentle, "I have over 20 years in this field. I've seen carbon monoxide leaks, mold infestations, faulty wiring. I have never seen anything like this. This is deliberate, and it's sophisticated." My mind raced, a frantic animal looking for any escape from this horrific truth. The renovation. 6 months ago, Gregory had insisted on upgrading the entire HVAC system. He'd said it would be more efficient, that he'd gotten a great deal through a friend. There'd been workers in and out for 2 weeks. Gregory had supervised everything. And Evelyn, my brilliant Evie, before architecture, she'd been a chemistry major for 2 years at Stanford. She'd always loved her lab work. The pieces, jagged and cruel, began to click into place. My fatigue, my headaches, the middle of a night panic attacks, Gregory's insistence that it was nothing, Evelyn's return home, just as my symptoms had begun to worsen. "How long?" I whispered, my throat tight. He examined a small notepad where he'd jotted down numbers. From the buildup of residue on the dispersal valve and the programming log I was able to access, I'd estimate it's been active for approximately 5 months. 5 months. The timeline was a perfect, sickening match. Why? The word was a breath, a prayer, a curse. "That," Robert said, standing up, "is a question only they can answer. But ma'am, you cannot stay here. You need to get your essential belongings, documents, medications, a change of clothes, and you need to leave this house, right now. And you cannot tell your children. I can't just leave. This is my home." They are my children. Someone in this house has been slowly, systematically, making you sick, he said, his voice slow and urgent. There is no conversation to be had with that person. There is only removal from this situation. Now, I looked toward the staircase, imagining Evelyn asleep in her childhood bed. Gregory tapping away at his keyboards in the basement. My babies, the boy I'd taught to ride a bike, the girl I'd held all night when she had pneumonia. The images collided with the mental picture of the device Robert described. A cold mechanical cancer growing in the belly of our home. A floorboard creaked upstairs. Evelyn was awake. Mom, her voice floated down, thick with sleep. Who are you talking to? Robert and I locked eyes. Tell her I'm the HVAC technician. Finishing up, he whispered. It's just the air quality man. Honey, he's almost done. I called back, my voice miraculously steady. Okay, I'll be down in a bit. Robert moved closer. Mrs. Gable, we have to go now. Do you have your important papers? In the lockbox in my closet. Go, get them. Be quick and be quiet. I'll wait here. I moved on legs that felt like water. Every step up the staircase a monumental effort. My bedroom, my sanctuary, with its view of the garden, now felt like a gas chamber. I could almost smell the poison in the air. I opened the closet, my hands shaking so badly, I could barely work the combination on the small fireproof box. Inside lay the artifacts of my life, my passport, the deed to the house, my will, the life insurance policy Arthur had taken out so long ago. I stuffed them into my large leather handbag. I grabbed my medication from the bathroom, a few pieces of jewelry from my dresser. As I turned to leave, my eyes fell on a silver-framed photograph on my nightstand. It was from Mother's Day, just 4 months ago. Gregory and Evelyn were on either side of me, their arms wrapped around my shoulders, all of us smiling brightly. Gregory had bought the flowers I was holding. Evelyn had framed the photo. In that moment, frozen in time, we were the perfect, loving family. Now, I knew. The device had already been humming away in the basement, and my children's smiles were lies crafted in a laboratory of betrayal. I took the photograph and shoved it into my bag, not as a comfort, but as a warrant, a reminder of the depth of the deception. I crept back downstairs. Robert was standing by the front door, his toolkit in hand. He gave me a tight, encouraging nod. The kitchen door swung open, and Evelyn walked in, dressed in a rumpled t-shirt and yoga pants. Her blonde hair, a messy bun. She looked young and vulnerable, and my heart ached. So, what was the verdict? She asked, yawning. Is our air trying to kill us? Just a buildup of mold in the old ducts, Robert said smoothly, his voice a masterclass in calm professionalism. I've applied a treatment. You should notice the smell dissipate in a day or two. Oh good. Mom was really worried about it. She turned to me, her eyes still puffy with sleep. Are you going out? The question, so innocent, felt like a trap. Yes, I have some errands to run. Bank, post office. Do you want company? I don't have any interviews today. The thought of being trapped in a car with her, making small talk, made my skin crawl. No, that's all right, sweetheart. It's just boring stuff. Robert moved toward the door. Well, my work here is done. You have a good day, ladies. How much do I owe you? I asked, playing my part. The diagnostic visit is $89.50. I'll email you the invoice. I fumbled in my purse, pulled out $100 bill, and handed it to him. Our fingers brushed, and in that brief contact, I felt a surge of solidarity. Thank you, I said, and the words were laden with a meaning only we understood. My pleasure, Mrs. Gable. He opened the door and stepped out. I turned to my daughter, my little girl. I'll be back later. Okay, Mom. I love you, she said, smiling that same sweet smile from the photograph. The words, once a balm, now felt like a shiv to the heart. I love you, too, I managed, the lie tasting of ash. I walked out of my house, my legs moving on autopilot. The bright afternoon sun felt alien, accusatory. Robert was already in his white service van, the engine running. He leaned over and pushed the passenger door open. I climbed in, clutching my bag to my chest like a shield. We need to put some distance between you and this place, he said, pulling away from the curb. I watched my home, the entire physical embodiment of my life, shrank in the side view mirror. The hydrangeas, the lavender, the bay window, a stage for a play I never knew I was in. Where are we going? My voice was hollow. Somewhere public, where we can think. There's a library about 15 minutes from here. We can talk there, call the authorities, the police. The word made it all terrifyingly real. Double quotes, Mrs. Gable. What we're dealing with is attempted murder. This is far beyond my pay grade. Murder. My children weren't just ungrateful or distant, they were potential killers. The van felt like it was spinning. I rolled down the window, gulping in the fresh, untainted air. What if we're wrong? I pleaded, a last, desperate grasp at my old reality. What if there's an explanation? He glanced at me, his expression resolute. Ma'am, before I started my own company, I worked for an industrial safety firm. I've inspected factories, labs, you name it. What I saw in your basement is a closed-loop aerosol delivery system. There is no innocent application for that in a residential basement. None. The finality in his voice extinguished the last flicker of my denial. We drove the rest of the way in a heavy silence. The library was a modern, quiet building of glass and steel. Robert found a secluded study, Carol, in the reference section, far from other patrons. Okay, he said, his voice low. We have options. The first is to call the police right now. Tell them what I found. They'll get a warrant, search the house. And if they've already dismantled it, Gregory is smart. If he suspects anything, he'll have taken it apart in the time I've been gone. That's a risk. The second option is to gather more evidence first. I took pictures with my phone while I was down there. I could go back under a pretext, say I left a tool, or need to do a follow-up reading, try to get more concrete proof. Why would you do that for me? You've already done so much. He was quiet for a moment, looking down at his hands. My aunt, she died a few years back. Unexpectedly, the doctors said. Rapid onset, neurological decline. It was only after the funeral that we found out her live-in boyfriend had been siphoning her savings. We always wondered, but by then, it was too late to prove anything. I couldn't help her. Maybe I can help you. His confession created a fragile bond in that sterile library room. My phone buzzed. A text from Evelyn. Evelyn to 14 p.m. Mom, everything okay? You've been gone a while. I showed the screen to Robert. His face tightened. They're monitoring you. Text back that the bank was a nightmare. Long lines. I typed the message, my fingers clumsy. The immediate reply was telling, Evelyn, 2:16 p.m. What did you need at the bank? Asterisk, they're panicking. Robert murmured, they're trying to track your movements. We need to act fast. Once they're sure, they might destroy the evidence or accelerate their plans. The thought was a cold knife in my gut. What do you suggest? I'll go back. I'll say, I need to verify the mold treatment is adhering properly. I'll document everything I can. Then we go straight to the police. In the meantime, you need somewhere safe to stay. A hotel? He drove me to a modest chain hotel near the highway, paying for the room in cash so it couldn't be traced to me. Room 317. He walked me to the door, checking the locks. The view from the window. Don't answer the door for anyone but me. Order room service if you're hungry. I'll be back in 2 hours. After he left, the silence of the room was absolute and suffocating. I was adrift. My phone buzzed again. Gregory this time. Gregory, 2:45 p.m. Evelyn says, you're acting weird. Where are you? Asterisk, I didn't reply. A few minutes later, it rang. His name flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. He called again and again. The relentless ringing was a form of psychological warfare. Finally, I answered. Mom, where are you? His voice was tight, stripped of its usual casual indifference. Out. I have a right to go out, Gregory. What's going on? You never just disappear like this. Since when do you track my comings and goings? I shot back. There was a pause. We're just worried. You haven't been yourself lately. The forgetfulness, the fatigue. Maybe you should see a doctor. The audacity of it, the sheer, chilling gall, took my breath away. They were creating the symptoms and then using them as proof of my instability. I'll consider it, I said, my voice icy. Come home, Mom. We can talk about this. I'll be home when I'm ready. I hung up, my entire body trembling. I lay on the stiff hotel bed, the tears finally coming. I wept for Arthur, for the life we'd built, for the children we'd raised who had become these hollow, monstrous strangers. I wept for the woman I was just this morning, whose biggest concern was a funny smell. When the storm of tears passed, a new feeling began to emerge from the wreckage. A cold, clear fury. They had stolen my peace, my health, my trust. They would not steal my life. Robert returned just after 5 p.m., his face grimmed. He held up his phone. I got it all. Video, close-up photos, but it's worse than we thought. He showed me the video. It was shaky, dark, but clear. The device was exactly as he'd described. A professional-looking apparatus with two small metal canisters, a digital control unit, and a thin tube snaking up into the main ductwork. Then he played an audio recording, my children's voices, filtered through the basement floor, crisp and clear. Gregory, she knows something. Her texts are off. Asterisk Evelyn, did that HVAC guy say something to her? I knew we shouldn't have let a stranger in. Gregory, it doesn't matter. We can't wait the full 8 weeks. The debt is due Friday. They aren't messing around. Evelyn. So we moved to plan B. The gas leak. It's riskier. Gregory. It's faster. We stage it. A tragic accident. We'll be grieving children, inheriting a paid-off house, and a life insurance payout. No one questions a gas leak in an old house. I felt the room sway. Plan B. A gas leak. Quick, violent, and utterly plausible. They weren't just willing to wait for me to fade away. They were prepared to blow me up. We have to call the police. Now, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Robert was already dialing 911. He explained the situation with a cool efficiency that I admired, giving the hotel's address. We have credible evidence of a conspiracy to commit murder. The suspects are at the victim's residence and believe she is here. We require immediate assistance. As he hung up, my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. Unknown, 5:32 p.m. We know you're at the Crestwood Inn, room 317. Come down to the lobby. Mom, let's talk about this like a family. My blood turned to ice. Robert, they're here. He swore under his breath. How? They must have followed you, or put a tracker on my car. I looked out the peephole. The hallway was empty. For now. Another text, this time from Evelyn. Evelyn, 5:34 p.m. We don't want to hurt you. We're worried about you. Your mind hasn't been right. Come downstairs before you do something you'll regret. They're setting the narrative, Robert said, his jaw clenched. They're going to claim you're mentally incompetent. We can't wait for the police here. They might try to force their way in. He cracked the door open and looked down the hall. Fire exit. Now. We slipped out of the room and into the concrete stairwell, the door swinging shut behind us with a heavy thud. We were 3 floors up. Our footsteps echoed like gunshots in the enclosed space. We had just reached the ground floor landing when the door above us burst open. Mom, stop. It was Gregory's voice, ringing with a fury I'd never heard. We burst out into the back alley, a narrow corridor of dumpsters and stained concrete. Robert pulled me toward the street, but a figure stepped out from behind a delivery van, blocking our path. Evelyn. She held a small, dark object in her hand. Not a syringe. A taser. It didn't have to be this way, Mom, she said, her voice eerily calm. You could have just gotten sick. It would have been peaceful. Now it has to be messy. Evelyn, please, I begged, my back against the cold brick wall. This is madness. We're your family. Family doesn't let family drown in debt. Gregory shouted, emerging from the fire exit behind us. He was holding a tire iron. I owe people, Mom. Bad people. And Evelyn's business partner cleaned out their accounts. We need that money. So you kill me for it. It's just business, Evelyn said, her eyes flat and cold. A financial restructuring. She raised the taser. Robert moved to shield me, but I pushed past him. A lifetime of love, however twisted it had become, boiled over into a protective rage, not for myself, but for the children they used to be. You will not touch him, I snarled, my voice guttural, foreign to my own ears. You will not touch me. This ends now. The shriek of sirens cut through the alley, impossibly loud, impossibly beautiful. Police cars swarmed both ends of the narrow passage, their red and blue lights painting the grim walls in strokes of urgent color. Freeze. Drop your weapons. Hands in the air. Gregory dropped the tire iron with a clatter. Evelyn hesitated for a split second, her finger on the taser's trigger, a wild, cornered look in her eyes. Then, with a sob of sheer frustration, she let it fall to the ground. The next hours were a blur of statements, detectives, and the surreal sight of my children being read their rights and led away in handcuffs. Robert's evidence was damning. The police executed a search warrant on my house and found the dismantled device. The chemical canisters labeled with dosages and timetables in Evelyn's precise handwriting, hidden in Gregory's server rack, and a file on his computer titled Estate Liquidation Timeline. The trial was swift. The truth was laid bare. Gregory's gambling debt was over $150,000, owed to a syndicate that had sent him a final, gruesome warning. Evelyn had been involved in an embezzlement scheme at her old firm and was facing prosecution. Needing the money to repay the funds and avoid prison, my death was their only exit strategy. Their defense crumbled against the mountain of evidence: the device, the audio recording, their own digital footprints. Gregory was sentenced to 22 years in a state penitentiary. Evelyn received 8. I sat in the courtroom every day, a silent witness to the complete unraveling of the family I thought I knew. There were no apologies, no pleas for forgiveness, only a cold, transactional regret that their plan had failed. I sold the house. I couldn't bear to walk through those rooms again, each one a monument to betrayal. With the proceeds, I bought a small, sun-drenched cottage on a bluff overlooking the sea, hundreds of miles away. The salt air scours the lingering scent of poison from my lungs, and the roar of the ocean drowns out the echoes of their lies. Robert and I stay in touch. He checks on me every week. He is the brother I never had, the family I found in the wreckage. He helped me understand that the bonds we choose, forged in decency and courage, are stronger than the ties of blood that have turned to venom. Now, when I sit on my porch and watch the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in colors Arthur would have loved, I am at peace. I am a survivor. The scars are there, deep and permanent, but they no longer bleed. They remind me that I faced the deepest betrayal a person can know and walked out of the fire, not with bitterness, but with a hard-won wisdom. True strength isn't about never being broken. It's about gathering the pieces and building something new, something stronger, from the rubble. What small moment made you question everything you thought was safe? Share your story in the comments below.